Okay, fifth and final question, which I appreciate getting, and it's very relevant to what we talked about on Sunday, and actually last Sunday. And it reads like this. Romans 13:1 says we are to obey our government leaders who are put there by God. If a government says that we should go to war, should we not submit to them as per Romans 13? And there's a passage in Romans 13 that talks about obeying those who are put in authority over us by God. And I'm glad that we got asked that question because it's very relevant to what we're dealing with. In fact, it's very applicable to some of our own people in our congregation. And so my response to this is simply this. Yes, we are to obey our government authorities, but as we discussed last week, when we sense as a community that our government is asking us to do things that are contrary to what God has called us to, then it's necessary for us to say to our government, no, I cannot agree with you on this, and I will not go there. And so I think in this case, for myself and for others who read these passages the way that I do, we would say, when the government says you need to go to war, our response would be no, we will not agree with you on this. But I want to point out that there are many reputable Christian men and women who would disagree with me and others on this point. And they would say, no, we should go to war, particularly when people are being violated and countries are being oppressed, and it's necessary for us to step in. I would say just simply they're wrong in how they interpret that portion of Scripture, but they would likely say the same thing of me. So we try to figure out how we approach that, and yet we can still respect each other in our disagreements. So in this case, I'm not condemning someone who would say, no, it's, in my conscience, I feel that I need to do this, and it's fine for me to do that. I just happen to disagree with him because I think what Jesus says is very clear. And I think, therefore, when our government says, no, we're going to go to war, my response is, no, I will not do that. And I think there are many times when war is justified unnecessarily. And you can get into a whole conversation about just war theory and whether it's applicable today or not. But needless to say, we're going to have a differing opinion on this. But I would add this. When you read the Romans 13 passage, read what comes before it in chapter 12. And read what comes after that passage that talks about obeying our government authorities. And you'll read that Paul is saying in both cases, on either side of this Romans 13 passage, love your enemies. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, because love does no harm to its neighbor. And I think love does no harm to its enemies as well. So those of you who are interested in this, read through Romans 12 and through to the end of Romans 13 and see how this government passage is couched in between two passages about loving others. And then pray through and read through the rest of Scripture in Matthew chapter 5 and in Luke chapter 6 and in other places like that. Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 to 14, which is kind of about God's community, but I still think it's applicable to how we treat people. And so you never go wrong with love and the gospel of peace. And yet we will continue to kind of camp out on both sides of this issue. And I certainly respect those who would see the other side of this. And we'll continue to sharpen each other as we talk it through. Thanks for your questions. And next week we'll jump in on Jesus and compassion and what it means to reach out to the outsider. God bless.